After the Great Hyperspace War of 5000 BBY, the Jedi and the Republic believed that the threat of the Sith Empire was gone forever, never to return. After all, such had been the case with the other enemies the Republic had defeated over its long history. The Honorable Union of Decivro and Tyon, the Kumari Empire, the Signatories of Waymensi, and others like them had all been swept into the dustbin of history. But as the Jedi would soon learn, the Sith were different from the threats that had come before them. Fragments of the Sith Empire had escaped the Republic's counter-invasion of the Sith worlds, fleeing to far corners of the galaxy. On some of these distant readouts, the Sith Lords survived in secret, patiently awaiting the day when they would have their revenge. As centuries passed and the dark side began to grow in strength once again, the Sith made their return, unleashing a new era of war and bloodshed upon the galaxy. But these Sith were different from the ones who had come before. In the millennium since the Great Hyperspace War, both Sith Lords and their empires had changed, as had the way they waged war on the Republic. In this video, we'll be taking a look at how these new Sith empires had evolved from their forebears, examining their military history, technology, and command structures.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
In 4000 BBY, 1,000 years after the end of the Great Hyperspace War, the dark side was on the rise in the galaxy, and the Republic was beset by crisis after crisis. That year, a team of Jedi apprentices stationed on the planet Onderon, led by Ulic Qel-Droma, discovered that the planet was secretly under the influence of the long-dead Dark Lord of the Sith, Freedon Nad, whose acolytes still ruled over the city of Iziz. Nad had seized power on Onderon 400 years before, and his rise marked the first appearance of a Sith Lord since the end of the Great Hyperspace War. The Jedi had swiftly defeated Nad, but Sith influence had persisted on Onderon, and from there, it would soon spread across the galaxy. Over the course of the next few years, the followers of Freedon Nad, secretly aided by the spirit of the Dark Lord himself, caused turmoil on Onderon, culminating in 3998 BBY's Nadist revolt. From the Nadists, a cult of Sith-obsessed young nobles from the Empress Teta system, the Krath, got their hands on ancient Sith teachings, learning terrible darkside techniques and using them to stage a coup in their home system. The Jedi and the Republic Navy launched an assault on the Empress Teta system to drive the Krath from power, but they were defeated by a combination of Sith sorcery and kamikaze tactics. The Krath retaliated by attacking a Jedi conclave on Deneba, prompting Ulic Qel-Droma to attempt to infiltrate the cult and destroy it from within, against the advice of the Jedi Masters. Remnants of the old Sith Armada on Thule and Massassi readouts on Yavin 4 began to stir, and the Sith-influenced Murkrosa Order began a campaign to seize power in the Tapani sector. The Sith were beginning to rise again, and all they needed was a leader. That leader ended up being a fallen Jedi by the name of Exar Kun, a proud man who was corrupted to the dark side by the spirit of Freedon Nad. Fascinated by the Sith and determined to learn more about them, in spite of his Jedi Master's warnings, Kun had followed Sith acolytes from Onderon to Freedon Nad's tomb on Duxon, Onderon's fourth moon. There, Nad's spirit bid Kun travel to Korriban and then Yavin 4, where the young Jedi succumbed to the dark side. On Yavin 4, Kun laid claim to ancient Sith artifacts belonging to the long-dead Dark Lord, Naga Sadow, which he used to destroy Nad's spirit and declare himself a Sith Lord. Kun claimed Yavin's temples for his own, enslaving the local Massassi and conscripting them to build new temples and fortresses in his honor. At first, Exar Kun saw the other Sith remnants, particularly the increasingly powerful Krath cults, as rivals, and he headed to Empress Teta to wipe out the Krath leaders. There, the leader of the cult, the Sith witch Ali Makito, had captured Ulic Qel-Droma and corrupted him to the dark side. Kun and Qel-Droma fought one another only for their Sith amulets to resonate and bring forth a vision of the Sith Lords of old. The spirit of the Dark Lord Marco Ragnos bid the two work together, proclaiming Exar Kun the Dark Lord of the Sith and naming Ulic Qel-Droma his Sith apprentice. After the vision faded, Kun and Qel-Droma joined forces, vowing that together they would bring down the galaxy. The Sith Lords had risen again, and they would quickly gather a coalition of Sith remnants and agents of the dark side, which unleashed a great Sith war upon the Republic in 3996 BBY. The Sith Empire of the Great Sith War was one of the most unique, most notably because it never truly became a real empire. It was a diverse coalition of anti-Republic forces seeking to re-establish the Sith Empire, a goal that it never even came close to succeeding at. Still, it's worth a close look at for two main reasons. Firstly, it was an important step in the development of Sith military tactics and technology, and it was also an important step in the development of the Sith as an order. Exar Kun's Sith coalition primarily consisted of 5 factions, each of which oversaw its own operations and had its own internal command structure, though all answered to the Sith Lords. The first factions to join the coalition were the remnants of the old Sith Empire and the Krath cults, which were soon joined by the Makrosa Order. Exar Kun established the Brotherhood of the Sith, an order of fallen Jedi, to lead the coalition, while Ulic Qel-Droma completed the coalition by recruiting the Mandalorian Crusaders to the cause. The Sith also signed a non-aggression pact with the Hutts during the war, which also allowed Sith fleets to resupply in Hutt space. The Mandalorians and the Makrosa Order were semi-independent allies of the Sith with their own objectives and command structures, and we're mainly going to be focusing on the other 3 coalition factions in this video. Still, both factions made significant contributions to the Great Sith War. After helping the allied house Mercetti seize control of the Tapani sector, the Makrosa Order, led by High Lady Breswold III from a castle on Nysa, turned the shipyard planet Fondor into a Sith military stronghold and contributed numerous assassins to the Sith cause. The nomadic Mandalorian Crusaders, led by Mandalore the Indomitable, contributed their industrial base on Mandalore and across Mandalorian space to the war effort, as well as vast fleets of warships and armies of Beskar-clad Basilisk war droid-mounted Mandalorian warriors. The Mandalorians mostly fought on their own against Republic forces in isolated theaters, but on occasion they carried out joint campaigns alongside the Krath. Initially, the Krath were the most powerful and well-organized of the Sith factions. They controlled the wealthy, densely populated, and industrial active KOTOR sector in the deep core, and they'd already transformed the 7 worlds of the Empress Teta system into military strongholds. The Krath turned nearly all of their home systems, many mines, carbonite smelters, factories, and shipyards over to military production, staffing them with slaves taken in raids on nearby systems, and they kept the 7 worlds under control through public executions and terrifying demonstrations of Sith sorcery. Originally, the Krath cult was led by Satal and Alima Keto, the heir to the Tetan throne and his cousin, respectively, while the other nobles that founded the cult formed the Krath Council, which oversaw planetary governance. But Satal was killed by Ulic Qel-Droma shortly before the alliance with Exar Kun, causing a shift in the Krath hierarchy. Now Empress Alima Keto was still technically the ruler of the Krath and the KOTOR system, while Ulic Qel-Droma commanded the Krath military, but in practice, Qel-Droma was the true leader of the Krath, something Alima quickly started to resent. The Krath maintained power through military force, and after militarizing their territory, they quickly amassed a vast armada to unleash upon the Republic. The soldiers of the Krath were a mix of genuine Krath loyalists, brainwashed conscripts, and fanatical berserkers that the Krath leaders controlled through the dark side. The elite among them were known as Tetan shock troopers, and they were sent into battle in hordes, armed with spears and blaster pistols. Higher-ranking Krath soldiers used heavy armor, heavier blasters, and a variety of sword types, mostly a mix of vibro swords and alchemically enhanced Sith swords, while others were brainwashed into becoming Chaos Troopers who were tasked with carrying out suicide attacks on enemy forces. These soldiers were backed by the feared Krath war droids, an advanced and extremely agile battle droid model, as well as by Krath Death Witches, who were Force-sensitive Krath loyalists trained to use the dark side to augment Krath armies. These troops were deployed on the ground in vast numbers by fleets of Tetan assault ships, also known as flying decks, in many battles of the Great Sith War. The Krath also controlled a sizable Starfleet consisting mainly of Supremacy-class attack ships, a class of moderately armed cruiser carriers which were supported by smaller Teton Corsairs, Teton assault ships, and stolen Republic vessels. These vessels received fighter support from vast swarms of CX-133 Chaos fighters, which were piloted by Chaos Troopers and designed for mass kamikaze attacks, a favorite tactic of the Krath military. In the year before the Great Sith War, this fleet had become battle-hardened through brutal military slaving raids on neighboring systems, and it made up the core of the new Sith military. The remnants of the old Sith Empire were one of the more disparate factions of Exar Kun's coalition, consisting mainly of two groups, the Massassi of Yavin 4 and the elite warriors of Thul. Thul was home to a much more organized and advanced Sith military unit, one that had been hiding on their barren homeworld ever since the Great Hyperspace War. This lost Sith army presumably functioned just like the armies of the old Sith Empire, and though it was a fairly small and insignificant part of the Sith coalition, it contributed a superweapon to Exar Kun's arsenal, the ancient Dark Reaper. The Massassi were by far the larger of the two remnants, and they were Kun's primary servants. Descended from the crew of Naga Sadow's flagship, the Corsair, which had fled to Yavin 4 after the Great Hyperspace War, these Massassi had long ago been mutated into monstrous creatures by Sadow's experiments, developing strength and toughness to rival a Wookiee. They had also lost most of their advanced technology, dividing into ritualistic tribes led by a class of priests. After Exar Kun conquered the Massassi, he reintroduced them to technology, but they continued to use simple melee weapons in combat, and they had very little organization or military complexity. Massassi armies were rarely seen in the Great Sith War, but when they did make an appearance, they acted as just a more wild and undisciplined version of the old Massassi armies of the Sith Empire, relying on overwhelmingly aggressive berserker tactics and the support of alchemically enhanced war beasts. Apart from the Corsair, which Exar Kun kept in reserve for special missions, they had no ships to contribute to the Sith's naval forces. Yavin 4 became the capital of Exar Kun's Sith Empire, home to fortresses, temples, and what few production facilities the Sith remnants had. These places were staffed by armies of slaves, some of them Massassi and others taken in slave raids by the Massassi. Both the Massassi and the Thul army entered directly to Exar Kun, with the Massassi worshipped as a god. After allying with Ulic Qel-Droma, Exar Kun traveled to the Jedi homeworld of Ossus to corrupt Jedi to his cause. He led many young apprentices to Yavin 4, where some swore allegiance to him willingly and others were forcibly corrupted by Sith spirits. These Dark Jedi formed the Brotherhood of the Sith, the ranks of which soon swelled with other fallen Jedi and Sith acolytes. Many of these fallen Jedi acted as sleeper agents, returning to Ossus before rising up and slaying their Jedi Masters on Kun's command. The Brotherhood then became the command caste of the Sith Coalition, answering only to the Sith Lords themselves. Some of the Dark Jedi served as commanders in the armies of the Krath and Sith remnants, while others were dispatched on independent missions as assassins. The Brotherhood of the Sith was led by Exar Kun and headquartered at his fortress on Yavin 4, but a group of the Brotherhood established another major stronghold on Korriban, where Jorak Uln established a monastery overlooking the Valley of the Dark Lords. Together, these factions attempted to establish the core of a new Sith Empire. They had very little territory, but their scattered strongholds were choked with military production facilities, staffed by armies of slaves, and fueled by the resources the Sith looted from Republic worlds. In that respect, Exar Kun's Sith Empire was similar to the original, but it diverged from its predecessor in many key ways. The Sith purebloods made up a very minimal part of the Sith Coalition, and they were ruled over by non-Sith Dark Lords. The old caste structures and traditions of the Sith were gone, replaced with a loose collection of haphazard hierarchies topped by the Sith Lords. The tactics and military technology of the new Sith were far more modern than those of the original Sith Empire. The Sith armies of this era made full use of blasters, deflector shields, lightsabers, and other Republic technology, and while their tactics remained overwhelmingly aggressive, they were more conventional than those of the older Sith. In the semi-combined military of the Sith coalition, the Krath and the Mandalorians provided the Sith's naval forces, which were loosely organized into fleets assigned to various theaters. On the ground, the Sith deployed armies of Krath berserkers, Massassi warriors, and/or Mandalorian crusaders, while assassins and agents from the Makrosa Order, the Krath, and the Brotherhood murdered Jedi and other key figures. This force was eclectic and had little central organization, but it was united by a single objective: to destroy the enemies of the Sith. The Great Sith War was one of the most devastating conflicts in galactic history, but it was relatively short, lasting just 6 months all told. Both the short duration and extraordinary damage caused by the conflict were both because of the tactics of the Sith used during the war. Exar Kun's plan wasn't to use his armies to conquer the galaxy. His focus was instead on destabilizing and destroying the Republic and the Jedi Order by carrying out vicious and largely opportunistic attacks against key strongholds and infrastructure, aiming to terrorize the people of the galaxy into submission. Kun believed that once the Jedi and the Republic were destroyed, the galaxy would be forced to accept the rule of his Sith Empire, and he could usher in a new golden age of the Sith. Because of this, Sith forces in the Great Sith War didn't bother trying to hold territory beyond their core strongholds, and when they attacked Republic worlds, they typically did as much damage as possible and then just moved on to a new target. This allowed Sith forces to spread rapidly, kill loads of people, and ravage Republic infrastructure, but it also left them short on production capacity and buffer territory, leaving them vulnerable to the eventual Republic counterattack once their armies had overextended and exhausted themselves. Still, the Sith saw remarkable success with this approach to the war, and over the course of 3996 BBY, they unleashed hell upon the galaxy. Sith offensives in the Great Sith War were divided between 4 campaigns, each handled by different factions of the Sith coalition. The Sith Remnants, the Krath, and the Mandalorian Crusaders each carried out separate offensives across Republic space, devastating scores of worlds in the process. These offensives were known as the Dark Reaper Campaign, the Krath Holy Crusade, and the Great Shadow Crusade, respectively. The 4th campaign was exclusively against the Jedi, and it saw the Brotherhood of the Sith assassinate many of the Order's greatest Jedi Masters. In the Dark Reaper campaign, Exar Kun and Ulic Qel-Droma led the Sith armies at Yavin 4 and Thul into Republic space, attacking systems across the Tyon cluster. The Sith used the reactivated Dark Reaper to wipe out whole armies of Republic soldiers on Makam Te and Raxus Prime, winning crushing victories for the Sith. As Exar Kun's Sith armies devastated the Republic's northeastern frontier, Krath forces poured forth from the KOTOR sector and began striking at the Republic's heart. Of all the theaters of the Great Sith War, the Krath Holy Crusade was the most destructive, as the Krath Armada spread out across Republic territory and razed system after system. The Krath Holy Crusade began slowly, with attacks on outposts along the Polemian trade route and Rimmer trade route. In the south, with the assistance of the Makrosa Order, the Krath struck at Harun Kal, Al-Ha, and the Republic shipyards at Salast, while in the north, they supported the Dark Reaper campaign and raided systems near the edge of the Koros sector. But after Ulic Qel-Droma recruited the Mandalorians to the cause, the Krath ramped up their offensives, joining the Mandalorians on a joint campaign into the heart of the core worlds. Led by Ulic Qel-Droma, Alima Kido, and Mandalore the Indomitable, the Krath and Mandalorians stormed the Foros shipyards, where the Krath stole a whole fleet of Republic warships, and then they attacked Coruscant itself. The assault did tremendous damage to Galactic City and inflicted heavy casualties on the Republic defenders, and initially, the Krath were able to seize a number of key targets, including the Republic Navy Command Center. Ulic Qel-Droma attempted to use the Republic Command Center to order every Republic capital ship to jump to the same coordinates, which would destroy the entire Navy, but fortunately for the Republic, the tides of the battle soon turned, thanks to treachery from within the Krath's own ranks. Tired of playing second fiddle to Ulic in her own cult, Alima Kido prematurely ordered Krath forces on Coruscant to retreat, allowing the Republic to win the day and capture Ulic Qel-Droma. Now under Alima's sole command, the Krath went on a rampage into the core worlds and then down the Polemian trade route, attacking the Republic stronghold of Vento and the major Polemian worlds Chazwa, Tanab, and Geyser. From there, the Krath advanced into the Slice, the heartland of the Republic, attacking targets across the Inner Rim, Expansion region, and Mid-Rim. After crushing Republic forces on Nazri and Sikapus, the Krath divided their fleets and spread out across Republic space. One fleet struck New Absalon and Randon before being driven off to Hutt space, where the Republic's Swift fleet destroyed it at Bunta, while another won a series of brutal victories at Adahox, Nyxor, Dalang, and Lanik. Meanwhile, Alima attempted to take control of the Mandalorian Crusaders as well, but Mandalore rebuffed her advances and helped Exar Kun free Ulic from Republic custody instead. Around the same time, the Mandalorians embarked on their own offensive. They pushed out from Mandalorian space across the Republic's northern frontier, attacking Ithor and Ord Mantell before being defeated by a Republic counterattack at Iridonia. In their next campaign, the Mandalorians followed the Krath into the Slice, savaging Alpharides, Thespias, and Contrum along the way. As Ulic Qel-Droma resumed command of the Krath Armada, the Krath tore through Bothan space, winning another battle at Bothawoi before moving on to savage Mandar, Lerator, and Ando. Krath raids hit planets as far rimward as Herdessa and Rhodia, while the main Krath fleet moved on to the Corellian Run, attempting to move back coreward into the heart of the Republic. Meanwhile, Exar Kun ordered his Dark Jedi sleeper agents to rise up and kill their Jedi Masters, sparking a vicious Sith uprising that killed countless great Jedi. With the Jedi Order in chaos, Kun planned to follow this up with a strike at Ossus, the Jedi homeworld. After victories at Yblari and Belderon, the Krath fleets on the Polemian moved toward Chemplex 9, a major Republic Navy staging ground close to Ossus under the command of Alima Keto. Exar Kun gave Keto command of the Corsair, and on his suggestion, she attempted to use the ship's star-destabilizing dark side weapon to wipe out the Republic fleet. She was successful, but in the process, she caused all 10 stars of the Kron cluster to go supernova. This not only obliterated Chemplex 9 and the Republic fleet there, but it also took out the Krath fleet, killing Alima Keto, who Kun and Qel-Droma had intentionally sent to die as retribution for her betrayal on Coruscant. Most importantly, the shockwave from the supernova struck the Jedi homeworld of Ossus, forcing the Jedi to abandon the planet before it was cleansed of life. Kun and Qel-Droma took advantage of the chaotic evacuation to land on Ossus and steal as many Jedi and captured Sith artifacts as they could get their hands on, further worsening the blow the destruction of Ossus dealt the Jedi Order. The devastation of Ossus was one of the greatest victories the Sith ever achieved against the Jedi Order, but it was also the beginning of the end for Exar Kun's Sith Empire. Ulic Qel-Droma was captured by the Jedi and ended up renouncing the dark side during the battle, proving himself by teaching the Jedi techniques that allowed them to destroy the Dark Reaper in an attack on Thul. The Mandalorian Crusaders were soundly defeated in an attack on Onderon, which saw Mandalore the Indomitable perish after being forced to flee to Duxon, while the Republic Navy began a counterattack against Krath forces across the Slice. Large parts of the Krath fleet had already been destroyed at Chemplex 9 and Bunta, while most of the remainder was defeated on the Corellian Run by the Corellian fleet, which bested the Krath at Gamor, New Kov, Denon, and Gindin. Another Republic fleet, led by the Jedi, attacked the Tapani sector and initiated the cleansing of the 9 houses, purging the Macrosa Order and Sith influence from the region, while the Republic Rim fleet, guided by Ulic Qel-Droma, pursued Exar Kun to Yavin 4. After besting the last of the Sith fleet at Toprawa, the Republic blockaded Yavin 4, trapping Kun and his remaining followers on the surface. The Republic army landed ground troops which defeated Kun's Massassi warriors in battle, while the Republic Navy began an orbital bombardment of the temples. Realizing he was outmatched, Kun summoned all his remaining Massassi and conducted a Sith ritual that allowed him to absorb their life forces, giving his spirit the power to transcend his mortal form, allowing him to roam the galaxy freely. But the thousands of Jedi gathered in orbit sensed the ritual as it was happening, and they worked together to create a wall of light around the moon, preventing Kun's spirit from escaping. When the wave of darkside power rising from the moon met the wall of light, it ignited a massive firestorm that swept across Yavin 4, laying waste to the moon. The remaining Massassi were wiped out, and Exar Kun had finally been defeated. For the most part, that was the end of the Great Sith War. While some Sith forces remained on Thule, the Massassi on Yavin 4 were all but wiped out, and the military might of both the Mandalorians and the Krath had been destroyed. The Macrosa Order had been defeated, and most of the Brotherhood of the Sith had been wiped out. Exar Kun, Mandalore the Indomitable, and Alima Kido were all dead, and Ulic Qel-Droma had renounced the Sith. A Republic counteroffensive eradicated most of what remained of the Krath in a counteroffensive against the Koro sector, liberating the worlds of Empress Teta. By the end of the year, all that remained of the Sith coalition was a few dead-enders who fled to the Sith worlds and went into hiding amidst the ruins of the old Sith Empire, particularly on Korriban, where the colony of Dreshte and the Brotherhood Sith Academy survived for decades. Following the Great Sith War, the Republic and the Jedi Order entered a period of rebuilding, doing their best to bounce back from the enormous damage Kun's followers had inflicted on them. But even as the Republic recovered from the war, its enemies were rebuilding their forces as well. Following the death of Mandalore the Indomitable on Duxon, the Mandalorians came under a new leader, Mandalore the Ultimate, who ushered in a series of reforms that reorganized the Mandalorian clans. This new Mandalore transformed the Mandalorians from nomadic crusaders of mainly Tong descent into a heavily centralized, industrialized empire whose warriors were drawn from many different species. In the years after the Great Sith War, the Mandalorians conquered a vast part of the Outer Rim, building a war machine that they planned to use to conquer the Republic. In 3963 BBY, the Mandalorians invaded the Republic along 3 invasion corridors, trouncing Republic forces and rapidly advancing into the heart of Republic space. A year later, the invaders breached the borders of the core worlds, and the Senate, desperate for assistance, called on the Jedi for aid. The Jedi Council refused to get involved, as the Order was still recovering from the Great Sith War, but many Jedi, led by 2 young knights named Revan and Malak, went to war anyway. Thanks to their leadership, the tide of the war turned, and over the course of the next 2 years, the Mandalorians were steadily driven back, although the Republic suffered heavy casualties in the process. In 3960 BBY, the Mandalorians were utterly defeated in a final battle above Malachor 5, and Mandalore the Ultimate was slain. The Mandalorian Wars were over, but their consequences would haunt the Republic for years to come. Over the course of Revan's campaign, the Jedi Council received disturbing reports that the Jedi commanding Republic forces had started employing brutal tactics, matching the Mandalorians for aggression and viciousness. After the Battle of Malachor 5, the Jedi Council called Revan and his surviving followers back to Coruscant to answer for what they had done, but instead, Revan and Malak led their followers into wild space, claiming to be pursuing remnants of the Mandalorian fleet. For months, nothing was heard from them, and the galaxy believed they were dead. Then, in early 3959 BBY, Revan and Malak returned to the Republic at the head of an invasion fleet. The two proclaimed themselves the Dark Lords of a new Sith Empire, and they set out to overthrow the Republic and destroy the Jedi Order. This was the start of the Jedi Civil War, sometimes known as the Second Sith War, which brought the already weakened Republic to the verge of total collapse. Darth Revan's Sith Empire was different from the generations of Sith that had come before. While the remnants of Exar Kun's Sith on Korriban and the other Sith worlds did swear allegiance to Revan, there was very little continuity between Revan's Sith and previous iterations of Sith. Revan's Sith were more of a corrupted splinter of the Republic, a homegrown evil that waged civil war against the rest of the galaxy rather than the external alien threat previous generations of Sith had been. The soldiers in Revan's armies weren't drawn from the Sith species or existing anti-Republic factions, but from the Republic military itself. The original core of Revan's army were the Jedi and Republic troops that had followed him during the Mandalorian Wars, the former of whom had been driven to the dark side by the horrors of war, and the latter of whom were more loyal to their savior and leader than they were to the ailing Senate. All throughout the Jedi Civil War, waves of additional defections constantly bolstered the numbers of the Sith. Jedi jumped ship for a variety of reasons. Some had become disillusioned with the Jedi Council, others fell to the dark side in the fighting, while others were captured, broken, and forcibly corrupted by the Sith. Many of the Republic's soldiers defected as well, led by high-ranking Republic officers like General Derrid, Admiral Karath, and Mon Halan. Like with the Jedi, their reasons varied. Many had become disillusioned with the Senate and believed in Revan's vision of a stronger, more militarized galaxy, while others just wanted to be on the winning side. This groundswell of support from within the Republic gave the Sith Empire a major advantage, allowing the Sith to rapidly conquer a huge chunk of the Republic. But especially early in the war, the speed of the Sith conquests and the enormous military they had at their disposal couldn't only be explained by defections. The Sith had seemingly limitless resources, endless fleets of ships and armies of war droids, and for years, the Jedi and the Republic puzzled over where it could have all come from. It was only at the end of the war that they learned the truth. After the Battle of Malachor V, Revan and Malak had traveled the galaxy in secret, searching for ancient star maps. These artifacts led them to the KOTOR system in the unknown regions, where they found the long-forgotten Starforge, the greatest creation of the ancient Rakatan Infinite Empire. Fueled by the power of the dark side, the Starforge consumed stellar matter and synthesized it into war material, allowing those who commanded it to create near-infinite fleets of warships. Revan had used the Starforge to amass his initial invasion fleet, and the Sith would continue to rely on the Starforge throughout the Jedi Civil War. At the same time, Darth Revan was wary about relying too heavily on the Starforge. The Starforge wasn't just a machine, it was a dark side entity in its own right, and it hungered, slowly consuming its controllers if they weren't careful. Thus, Revan only used the Starforge so far as it was necessary, and he took care to capture Republic infrastructure and industry intact, shifting military production from the Starforge to conventional factory worlds as the Sith Empire grew in size. Unlike the Sith of the Great Sith War, the Sith of the Jedi Civil War fought a conventional war against the Republic, seeking to conquer territory rather than just sow terror and destruction. But while Darth Revan's Sith Empire was more conventional in its goals and tactics than past Sith, its structure and the way it governed the territory it conquered was still rather unconventional for a centralized empire. The Sith Empire was essentially just a military, with no civilian government apparatus to speak of. The leadership of the Sith Empire was centralized, but it was also constantly mobile, issuing orders from various Sith flagships rather than operating from a single capital or stronghold. When the Sith conquered a planet, they typically kept its civilian government intact, just under the purview of a Sith governor, who was typically a low-ranking Sith acolyte. The governor commanded a military garrison, which suppressed resistance to Sith occupation, ensured that local industry met quotas, and played its part in the Sith war machine, and occasionally recruited the locals to join the Sith military. Apart from that, nothing really changed on Sith-conquered worlds. This system was pretty much all there was for government in the Sith Empire. Local governments handled most of the day-to-day work, and the Sith simply extracted the resources they wanted, ensured that their war machine kept running efficiently, and continued to focus on conquering the galaxy. Of the many worlds conquered by the Sith Empire, a few were especially important to the Sith war effort. The Rakata Prime system was the most important, of course, as it was the location of the Starforge, the Sith's primary manufacturing plant. The Starforge doubled as a stronghold in its own right, and was the closest thing the Sith Empire had to a true capital, and the Sith also had a strong presence on Rakata Prime itself, where they used the Temple of the Ancients as another key fortress. The Sith also controlled many former Republic manufacturing worlds and shipyards scattered across their territory, the most notable of which were Fondor, Corellia, Duro, and Rendili, all located in Sith enclaves in the core worlds. Korriban, the Sith Empire's public capital, was home to the Sith Academy, which churned out a steady stream of new apprentices to serve the Sith war effort, while Darth Revan's most fanatical disciples studied advanced and forbidden techniques in the Trace Academy on nearby Malachor 5. While the exact ranks and internal structure of the Jedi Civil War era Sith military are unknown, we at least know plenty about the military's composition. The main component of the Sith military was the Sith Armada, the Sith Empire's navy. It's possible that the military had a separate ground army to go along with it, but since Sith ground troops appeared to be no different from Sith naval personnel, it's possible that the Sith didn't bother with separate branches at all. Regardless, all components of the Sith military consisted of personnel from three main categories: battle droids, organic soldiers, and force sensitives. Revan's Sith Empire made extensive use of the droid, much as the Republic military had during the Mandalorian Wars. Since droids could be mass-produced by the Starforge, they were especially useful to the Sith. The Sith employed a variety of labor and utility droids aboard their starships for maintenance and manual labor, but their most well-known droid models were the war droids. Humanoid Kellinek technology Sentinel droids were the most common Sith battle droid model, used in large numbers as soldiers or guards. They were joined on guard duty in bases or the streets of conquered planets by Mark I municipal patrol droids and KX-12 probe droids, while in combat zones, the Sith often reinforced infantry with larger and much tougher assault droids. Dedicated assassin droids, including the infamous HK series assassin droids, were also used extensively by the Sith. More esoteric war droids of ancient Rakatan design were used as guards on the Starforge. Sith droids of all classes were very common, particularly in military bases or aboard starships, and no matter where they were stationed, they always occupied the bottom tier of the Sith military hierarchy. Of course, the Sith had large numbers of organic soldiers as well, which made up the core of the Sith military. Sith soldiers were divided into two main classes: basic Sith soldiers and Sith troopers. Basic Sith soldiers, which included low-ranking reservists and officers, were lightly equipped, wearing simple grey and black uniforms rather than proper battle armor, and they were often lightly armed as well. These soldiers served as guards or patrolmen in low-priority areas, and they made up the crews of Sith warships. Sith troopers were tougher and outfitted with much better equipment, including distinctive chrome full-body armor, both blaster rifles and melee weapons, and sometimes personal energy shields. The Sith troopers were the frontline soldiers of the Sith, making up the vanguards of ground armies, high-priority security forces, and the defensive garrisons of bases and warships. Sith trooper armor came to symbolize the forces of the Sith Empire during the Jedi Civil War, and it was similar to the body armor used by later generation Republic troopers, clone troopers, and stormtroopers. Worn over a black body glove, this battle armor was made of a light metal alloy and covered most of the body. While the helmets of clone and stormtrooper armor had visor shapes that evoked humanoid features, Sith trooper helmets didn't. Instead, they were bulbous and alien-looking, completely depersonalizing their wearers by covering their whole face with a one-piece black visor. Most Sith troopers wore chrome armor, while elite or high-ranking Sith troopers wore red armor, and a few specialty units, particularly Sith commandos, wore more ornate copper-colored armor. Elite Sith troopers were equipped with Sith energy shields, armband-mounted projectors that generated personal energy shields around the wearer. These shields were limited, as both sustained fire and repeated use would quickly burn out the generator, but they gave troopers equipped with them full protection from blaster fire and lightsabers for a short time. These shields gave the Sith a huge advantage after their introduction, but the Republic soon reverse-engineered the technology, and both sides learned that the shields were useless against simple melee weapons. As a result, Sith troopers, high-ranking officers, and even many low-priority soldiers were armed with short swords or vibroblades for use against shielded targets. Of course, Sith soldiers also made regular use of all manner of blasters and grenades, most notably the Sith Assault Gun, a class of souped-up blaster carbine popular among Sith troopers, and the high-end ionized Sith Assassin pistol, which was carried by covert operatives and Sith officers. Along with huge numbers of soldiers, the Sith Armada also contained plenty of starfighters and capital ships. The Sith Empire's main starfighter class was the Sith Fighter, a bare-bones, extremely agile interceptor designed with Rakatan technology by the Starforge. These ships were the TIE fighters of their day, fragile and deployed in vast numbers, and they were typically supported by various classes of bombers and shuttles. The primary capital of the Sith Armada was the Interdictor-class cruiser, a prototypical Republic design that was stolen by the Sith and enhanced by the Starforge. These 600-meter-long warships were heavily armed and capable of ripping starships out of hyperspace with their gravity well projectors. The Sith also made limited use of older, smaller Sith warship classes, as well as the Republic Centurion-class battlecruiser, a 1,200-meter-long command ship and starfighter carrier. Naturally, the Sith military had plenty of Force-sensitive personnel as well. The most common of these were the Dark Jedi, Jedi who had fallen to the dark side and joined the Sith. Dark Jedi were deployed frequently on covert missions, and they also served as commanders and elite soldiers. High-ranking Jedi who sided with Revan became Dark Jedi Masters, given authority over lesser Dark Jedi. While these Dark Jedi were aligned with the dark side and knew many dark side techniques, they weren't true Sith, as they'd received no formal training in the Sith arts or Sith teachings. Dark Jedi, or non-Jedi who sought to become Sith, had to travel to the Sith Academy on Korriban, where Sith hopefuls would become Sith apprentices and acolytes, if they survived long enough to make it that far. Sith apprentices and acolytes typically outranked lesser Dark Jedi, though not Dark Jedi Masters, and they were much less common. Most of them were stationed at the Sith Academy, the Temple of the Ancients, or on the Starforge. After much study and training, Sith apprentices could become Sith Lords, the ruling caste of the Sith Empire. Other Sith were trained at the Trace Academy on Malachor 5 to become Sith assassins, trained to hunt Jedi by feeding on the Force. For the most part, Sith and Dark Jedi outranked Sith soldiers, but there were some exceptions. The highest-ranking Sith officers, particularly the likes of Admiral Karath, the Supreme Commander of the Sith Armada, could order Dark Jedi, Sith apprentices, and even Dark Jedi Masters around, but even they had to answer to the Sith Lords. The lesser Sith Lords, in turn, answered to the two Supreme Sith, the rulers of the Sith Empire, the Dark Lord of the Sith and his Shadow Hand. Originally, the Dark Lord of the Sith was Darth Revan, while Darth Malak served as Shadow Hand. The Jedi Civil War began in 3959 BBY with a string of Sith victories. Darth Revan began the war with a surprise attack on the Republic shipyards at Forost, where the Sith made off with nearly all of the Republic Navy's large capital ships. Soon after, the Sith advanced from their strongholds at Rakata Prime and Korriban, establishing their first footholds in Republic space. The Tapani sector swore allegiance to the Sith Empire, bringing the shipyards of Fondor under Revan's control, and from there, Sith forces struck at Yagdul and Alantine 6, crushing Republic forces in both battles. In the north, Sith forces swept out from the Sith worlds to conquer a large part of the northern Outer Rim, besting the Republic at Axela, Roche, and Geyser. From this foothold in the north, the Sith Empire expanded into the Slice, winning major victories at Randon and Delung, while other Sith forces established enclaves in the core and launched an unsuccessful strike on Basilisk. For the most part, Darth Revan's leadership ensured that these early campaigns were fairly restrained, as Revan prioritized the preservation of Republic infrastructure. However, other worlds were punished for their resistance with acts of shocking brutality, such as the planetary bombardment that left the defenseless Republic planet Telos 4 uninhabitable. The Sith had a massive advantage over the Republic for most of the Jedi Civil War, but the Republic fought on anyway. The Republic Navy stopped the Sith from pushing into the southern slice in battles at Mon Gaza and Lannik, while the Sith enclaves in the core were prevented from joining forces by Sith defeats at Foles, Deveron, Denon, and Romamal. A Sith assault on the Selust shipyards was unsuccessful, and Sith thrusts into the heart of the core were turned aside at Chazwa, Kominor, and Palani. In northern wild space, the Sith conquered Iridonia and Ithor and then lost the former to Republic counterattack, though Sith forces held the line at Ithor. Many of these Republic victories were the work of Bastila Shen, a young Jedi who had the rare gift of battle meditation. Despite these setbacks, the Sith Empire won far more battles than it lost, and just 2 years into the war, the Sith had conquered a third of the known galaxy. The Jedi believed that the key to the Sith's tremendous success was Darth Revan, and so, in 3957 BBY, they laid a trap for the Dark Lord. Revan's flagship was lured into battle against a small Republic fleet, while Bastila Shan led a team of Jedi Knights in boarding the Dark Lord's flagship, hoping to capture Revan. However, Darth Malak saw a chance to usurp control of the Sith Empire, and he had his own ship fire on Revan's bridge during the battle, hoping to kill his master and the Jedi's greatest champion in one fell swoop. Darth Revan was apparently killed, and Darth Malak declared himself the new Dark Lord of the Sith, taking Darth Banden as his new Shadowhand. Under Malak, the Sith Empire changed its tactics dramatically. Unlike Revan, Malak didn't care about preserving Republic infrastructure. He intended to just rely on the Starforge for all his production needs. As a result, the Sith Armada abandoned all subtlety under Malak's leadership, responding to any and all resistance with overwhelming force. By 3956 BBY, Malak's forces were advancing up the Polemian trade route and north from Rendili into the heart of the Core Worlds, while in the Outer Rim, Malak's fleet defeated Bastila Shan's task force above Taris and conquered the planet. Bastila ultimately escaped Taris, despite Malak ordering its entire planet-wide city destroyed via orbital bombardment, and Malak was forced to dispatch bounty hunters, Dark Jedi, and even Darth Banden himself to track her down. All the while, the Sith won victory after victory, and it seemed the Sith's final assault on the Core Worlds would begin before the end of the year. But the Jedi had one last trick up their sleeves. Unbeknownst to all but a few, Darth Revan had survived Malak's betrayal, and the Jedi had been able to capture him, wipe his mind, and reprogram him with a new identity loyal to the Republic. Accompanied by Bastila, the amnesiac Revan, now retrained as a Jedi, embarked on a quest across the galaxy, seeking out the star maps on a mission to find the Star Forge. Once Malak learned of Revan's survival, he began hunting him as well as Bastila. He ordered the destruction of the Jedi Enclave on Dantooine to deny Revan a safe haven, and he ultimately captured Revan's ship after a mission to Manaan, in which Revan had slain Darth Banden. Revan escaped, killing Admiral Karath on the way out, but Bastila did not. Malak tortured Bastila into embracing the dark side, and when Revan and his allies led the Republic Navy to Rakata Prime to destroy the Starforge, Bastila, now Malak's Shadowhand, used her battle meditation to aid the Sith fleet. However, Bastila was redeemed at the 11th hour by Revan himself, who was now aware of his true identity and a willing servant of the light. Bastila began aiding the Republic instead, allowing Republic forces to break through the Sith fleet's battle lines and attack the Starforge directly. Revan killed Darth Malak in a lightsaber duel on the Starforge's observation deck, and then he and his allies fled the station. The Starforge was destroyed, and much of the Sith Armada was destroyed along with it. The Battle of Rakata Prime brought a swift and unexpected end to the Jedi Civil War. Most of the Sith leadership had been present for the battle, as Malak had gathered them at the Starforge to prepare for the final assault on Coruscant, and they were all killed as a result. The Sith had been deprived of the two things their empire relied on the most, the Starforge and a strong leader. In their absence, the Sith descended into a brief but brutal civil war which utterly destroyed the Sith Empire. Within a year of the Battle of Rakata Prime, the Republic retook all of its lost territory, and the remnants of the Sith were driven into the depths of the Outer Rim. There, they regrouped under the most powerful of the surviving Sith Lords, Darth Traya, Darth Nihilus, and Darth Sion. These Sith joined forces and spent the next few years waging a shadow war against the Jedi, but infighting among them and the return of Jedi exile Mitra Surik ultimately put a stop to their campaign. In 3951 BBY, Darth Nihilus and his forces were destroyed at Telos, while the rest of the Sith survivors were killed in the final destruction of Malachor V shortly thereafter. But as before, the Sith would eventually return, for another Sith Empire, the true Sith Empire, had been waiting in the unknown regions ever since the Great Hyperspace War, and it would soon exact its revenge on the Jedi and the Republic. But that's a story for another time. So what do you think? Would you like to see more videos about Sith military structure and ancient happenings? Let us know in the comment section below, and as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.